The crowd gathered near the landing pad, murmuring in confusion and excitement. Ships had just returned from the border war, and soldiers were stepping off one by one. Reed Carter, a quiet human man in his 30s, didn't expect any ceremony. He had only fixed a broken transport and helped a wounded officer, not a big deal. At least not to him, but today. The governor's guards summoned him to the platform with an official reward. He didn't want attention. But turning down the invitation would be dangerous. Step forward, human. The voice boomed from the loudspeaker. Reed walked slowly across the metal floor. Boots clicking, heart steady but unsure. At the center stood a tall alien governor scaled. Armored and towering over everyone. Red Carter, the governor said. His deep voice echoing across the square. Your service saved my daughter's life. The crowd clapped weakly, more curious than impressed. As thanks, the governor said, raising a clawed hand. Now, I offer you a rare and valuable prize. The back door of a carrier hissed open. Chains clattered onto the ground, heavy and cruel. Out stepped a girl tall, thin. Her purple skin covered in dirt and bruises. Her wrists were bound tightly. Collar glowing with a soft red light, she looked barely conscious. Her long hair tangled, her eyes lowered in shame, an enemy from the war. The governor announced proudly, "She's yours now, slave, by right of conquest." The crowd went quiet, watching for the human's reaction. Some expected a smile. Others waited for disgust, but Reed just stared at her, then stepped forward slowly, carefully. The girl trembled as he approached. Expecting pain, expecting orders, but instead, Reed spoke calmly to the guard. "Take off her chains." Silence. "Are you refusing the gift?" one of the guards asked, confused. "No," Reed said, his voice steady. "I'm accepting her, but not like this." The guard hesitated, looking to the governor, who shrugged with amusement. "Let him have his toy how he wants," the governor said, laughing with a press of a button. The collar unlocked and the chains dropped to the floor with a heavy thud. The girl's knees buckled, but Reed caught her before she fell. Her skin was cold, her breath shallow. Up close, he saw the thin scars on her arms. The chipped edge of her ear. She opened her eyes slowly, 2 golden orbs filled with confusion, fear, and something else, something alive. He whispered gently, "You're safe now." "Why?" she whispered, barely loud enough to hear. Then everything went black, and she fainted in his arms. The crowd was stunned, unsure how to react. Some laughed, thinking Reed was just being dramatic. Others murmured, calling him foolish, calling her dangerous, but Reed didn't care. He lifted her easily in his arms and walked away without asking permission. He didn't look back, didn't wait for cheers or thanks. He just walked past the guards, past the ships, past the burning eyes of those who believed she didn't deserve kindness. By the time he reached his small cabin at the edge of the outpost, the sun had started to set. He placed her gently on his bed, covering her with a blanket. She didn't wake, but her breathing steadied. Reed sat down on the floor beside her, back against the wall, and sighed. "I didn't ask for a slave," he whispered to himself, "but I couldn't leave her there." He looked at the girl once more, her face finally at peace in sleep, and in that moment, something inside him shifted. He didn't know why. He didn't know what this would become, but one thing was clear: this was no ordinary reward, and his life had just changed forever. She moved like a shadow, silent and watching every night. She waited until the lights were off, until the human was asleep, and every night. She gripped the small blade she had hidden under the bed. He had given her a warm room, soft clothes, and food, but she trusted none of it. Not yet, maybe not ever. Her name was Taliesin, though she had not spoken it aloud in a long time. Her names were for free people, not for those sold in chains. She didn't understand this man, this Reed Carter. Why had he freed her in front of so many? Why hadn't he touched her or ordered her around? Every day he brought food and placed it near the door, speaking kindly, then leaving her alone. She didn't eat for 2 days, expecting poison, but when her hunger became unbearable, she tried. The bread, nothing happened. Next day, she drank the soup. And again, she lived still. She kept the blade. Still she stayed ready. because kindness always came before cruelty in her world. Reed never knocked, never shouted. He gave her space, and slowly. She began walking around the small cabin. There were no locks on her door, no cameras. No slave collar, only freedom. But to someone like her, freedom felt more dangerous than chains. One night, Tali couldn't sleep. She crept down the hallway, holding the knife tight in her shaking hand. She pushed his door open. It wasn't locked. Inside, Reed slept on a thin mattress. Arm over his eyes, breathing slow and even, he looked so human, so plain, just a mechanic. Not a soldier, not a slaver. She stood over him, heart pounding. Knife in hand, one move, one cut, and she could disappear, but she didn't move. Instead, she just stared, eyes burning. Why hadn't he chained her? Why hadn't he used her? Why did she feel confused instead of angry? After a long moment, she turned away and left the room. The knife still cold in her grip. The next morning, Reed found her sitting at the table. Arms crossed, face hard. She was eating, finally. Not much, but enough to surprise him. He smiled gently and sat across from her. "I'm glad you're eating," he said. She didn't answer, just stared at him, chewing slowly. "You don't have to stay," Reed added. "But if you do, this house is yours too." Still no answer. What? Flicker, not trust. Not yet, but curiosity, after a long silence. She spoke for the first time since arriving. "What do you want from me?" Reed looked confused. "Nothing," he said simply. She narrowed her eyes. "Everyone wants something." "Not me," he replied. "I just didn't want to see you chained like that." Kali clenched her jaw, looking away. "You're a fool." "Human?" she muttered. "Maybe." He shrugged. "But I'm a fool who makes good soup." A small sound escaped her lips, half a laugh. Half a breath, she caught herself and looked angry again, like she'd shown too much. Later that evening, Reed walked into the kitchen and saw her staring at a photo on the wall. It was a picture of him with another woman, smiling, happy, in better days. "My sister," he said softly. "She died last year." Tali didn't respond, but she didn't move either. "War takes too much from too many," he continued. "I just wanted to give something back for once." Tali turned toward him, slow and cautious. "I don't understand." "You," she said. "You don't have to," Reed smiled. "Just rest, eat, heal." She hesitated before walking past him, brushing his arm gently, by accident or not. He didn't know that night she didn't hold the knife. Instead, she sat by the window, watching the stars in silence, somewhere out there. She had lost everything but here. In this quiet home with a strange human, something unfamiliar had begun to grow, a tiny seed. Not of love, not yet, but of something even rarer. Hope. "I am not your property," she said sharply. Her voice was cold, steady, but her hands trembled. Reed stood across the room, surprised not by the words, but by the pain behind them. He didn't respond right away, just stepped back, giving her space to Helios, and stood near the furnace. The light of the fire casting orange across her skin, she had chosen to speak again, but this time, not from fear, from something deeper, something burning. "I didn't say you were," Reed answered. Gently, Tali's eyes narrowed, but her breathing slowed. He could tell she was ready to run, ready to fight, ready for anything except kindness. Kindness always came with a price. She had learned that the hard way, but this human kept acting like it didn't, and that scared her more than chains ever had. Reed pointed to the hearth. "You're cold," he said. "Sit by the fire." She didn't move, didn't blink. He shrugged and sat down instead, laying out 2 metal cups and pouring hot broth. Into each, the smell drifted through the room, simple. But warm Tali's stomach growled, and her face flushed with embarrassment. She hated how her body betrayed her. He slid 1 cup across the floor toward her, then stared into the flames. Finally, she stepped closer, slow, cautious. She knelt beside him, not touching, not trusting, but closer than before. "I'm not used to this," she whispered. "I know," Reed said, not looking at her. "You don't have to be." She took the cup, held it between her hands, and asked quietly, "Why are you alone, human?" Reed didn't answer right away. The fire popped, and outside. The cold wind howled against the windows. He sipped his drink, eyes distant, then spoke. "I came to this frontier planet after my sister died," he said. "She was the last family." Tali didn't respond, but he could feel her listening, thought I'd fix machines. "Stay quiet, disappear," he added. She studied him for a moment, then said softly, "You still saved that alien girl?" Reed nodded slowly. "Yeah." "And then?" "Me," she whispered, not looking at him for a long time. Neither of them spoke. Then she said it carefully, like it hurt to bring it out. "My name is Talise." Reed turned to her, surprised. "I thought you didn't want me to know." "Your name," he said. "I didn't," she replied. "But I don't want to be that slave girl anymore." Something shifted in the air between them. She looked down at her hands, still dirty from weeks of captivity. "I want to burn what they gave me," she said suddenly. "The collar, the number, the chains." Reed stood up and opened a drawer. I brought out the collar she had thrown off the night he carried her home. It still blinked faintly, as if waiting to be reactivated. Tali took it with shaking hands, walked to the fire, and stared at it. Memories filled her head beatings. Commands pain whenever she disobeyed. She threw it into the flames. It sparked and hissed as the circuits melted. She stepped back, breathing hard, watching the fire devour it, and as it burned, something inside her cracked loose, something old and heavy. The collar didn't scream as it died, but she did, silently with tears. Reed placed a hand gently on her shoulder. She didn't pull. "Away, you're not what they made you," he said. She nodded, then looked up at him, eyes wet but fierce. "No," she replied. "I'm something else now." Suddenly, someone pounded at the door. Tali jumped, grabbing the nearby tool like a weapon. Reed motioned for her to stay back. Stepping to the door carefully, he opened it slowly, finding 2 government enforcers standing there. "We're here about the alien girl," one of them said. Tali stiffened, ready to run, ready to fight. "She ran off days ago," Reed lied calmly, took food and vanished. The enforcers scanned the room behind him. "Any signs she's come back?" Reed shook his head. "If I see her, I'll report it." The men grunted and walked away, leaving tracks in the snow. Reed closed the door slowly and turned around. Tali was frozen in place, staring at him. "You lied for me," she said, voice trembling. He nodded. "You deserve to choose who knows you're here." She blinked rapidly, as if trying to understand this man. Finally, she said, "I think. I believe you." That night, she slept without a weapon. And for the first time in years, she dreamed not of cages, but of fire. Warmth and a name she chose to give back. Asterisk, the banging on the door came like thunder in the night. Tali shot up. From the couch, heart racing, eyes wide, Reed was already moving. Pulling a blaster from the drawer beneath the sink, it was too late for visitors. And no one in town knocked like that unless they meant trouble. "Get in the back room," he whispered. Tali hesitated, but the fear in his voice made her move. She ducked into the shadows and pressed herself against the wall. Listening, she didn't need her sight. Her sharp ears could hear everything. Boots, crunching snow, the low hum of powered armor, at least 4 of them. Reed opened the door slowly. Hiding the blaster behind his leg, 4 mercenaries stood in the cold. Armor marked with red and silver. Not lawmen, not locals. These were hunters, the worst kind. The lead one stepped forward. A reptilian alien with cybernetic eyes. "We're looking for a missing asset," he said. "Female, tall, purple skin, very rare." Reed kept his face calm. "Haven't seen anyone like that." "Funny," the mercenary growled. "Our scans tracked her life signature to this sector." "Lots of refugees pass through," Reed replied. "You'll need better data than that." The mercs exchanged looks, then pushed past him into the cabin. Reed didn't stop them if he fought now. They'd kill him and burn the place down. Tali held her breath in the dark, muscles tense, ready to fight. But she remembered Reed's words, "Stay hidden." One of the mercs sniffed the air. "She's close," said. "I smell her." Another kicked open the bathroom door, then the closet, then turned toward the hallway. Just as he reached the back room, a high-pitched whistle filled the cabin, then crack. A blaster bolt hit the metal pipe above the merc's head. Steam exploded everywhere. Reed stood in the kitchen, blaster raised, face cold. "That's close enough," he said. The merc he'd shot at dropped to the floor, screaming as boiling. Steam hit his armor. The others turned, raising weapons. Tali exploded from the shadows. Leaping like a wild animal, she tackled the nearest mercenary, slamming his head into the wall with a growl. Another turned to shoot, but Red fired again. Hitting him in the shoulder, chaos broke loose blaster fire. Smoke, footsteps on metal. Tali grabbed a blade from the counter and cut through the last attacker's thigh. He dropped with a cry, and she kicked his weapon away. The leader tried to escape, but Reed shot him in the leg and dragged him back inside. Tali stood over him, blood on her hands, eyes glowing with rage. "Who sent you?" she hissed. The merc spat at her. "Your property no matter where you run." Tali's fingers clenched into fists, but Reed stepped between them, aimed the blaster at the merc's chest and said, "Not anymore," with one final shot. It was over. The cabin fell silent, broken only by the sound of Tali's heavy breathing. She sank to her knees. Shaking, Reed knelt beside her, gently placing a hand on her back. "You're safe," he whispered. "They won't take you." She looked at him, eyes shining with something more than just fear. "You risked everything," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "They would have killed you, I know," he replied. "But I won't let anyone chain you again." Blood still dripped from her knuckles, her body bruised, but in that moment, she felt stronger than she had in years. Not because she fought, not because she won, but because someone had chosen her. Not as a weapon, not as a slave, but as someone worth protecting. That night, they burned the mercenaries' bodies far. From the house, the flames crackled in the cold wind, lighting the dark woods with orange light. Tali stood beside Reed, holding his coat around her shoulders. She didn't speak much, but when he looked at her, she nodded. No more running. No. More hiding. If they came again, she'd fight. But now, she wouldn't be alone. The wound on her back was deep, black around the edges, where the blaster had burned skin and nerve. Reed worked in silence. Cleaning the gash with soft hands and a clenched jaw, Tali bit down on a cloth, refusing to scream, not because the pain wasn't bad, but because she didn't want him to see her weak. "You're lucky it missed your spine," he muttered, half an inch the other way, and "I know," she whispered through clenched teeth. "Finish it." He poured warm cleanser over the wound. And she trembled, not from fear not anymore, but from how close his hands were. Gentle hands, not cruel, not demanding every time. He touched her. Her thoughts became louder, more confused. She'd never been touched like this, by someone who wanted nothing in return. When he was done, she sat still, her back to him, her hair falling over one shoulder. She didn't turn around, but she spoke. "I wasn't just a slave," she said, voice low. "I was born to be something worse." Reed sat beside her. Waiting, not pressing, she continued, the words spilling like poison she needed to let out. "My people created a special group during the war." She said, "We were bred not born to obey, modified from birth, taught only one thing. Serve, fight, kill, repeat." Reed listened quietly, watching the fire reflect in her eyes. "I was number 12, she continued. "The last to survive. They trained me with chemicals. Shock collars, forced combat, then they sold me." Reed's fists clenched, but he said nothing. Tali looked at him finally, her expression hard but broken. "They told me I was special," she said bitterly. "But they only meant useful. Even after the war ended, I was passed between warlords, commanders, buyers. I never had a choice, not once." Reed's voice was calm but filled with pain. "Then the day I found you said why," he recalled. She nodded slowly. "Because I didn't believe freedom was real?" The silence between them stretched long and heavy. Then she reached into the drawer beside her cot and pulled out a small device. She handed it to him carefully. "What's this?" he asked. "My neural implant controller," she said. "It's still active. But I turned it off only. I can do that. If someone else finds it, they can turn me into what I was again." Reed held the device gently, then without warning snapped it in half. Tali gasped, eyes wide. "What are you doing?" "Making sure no one can ever control you again," he said firmly. "But that was dangerous," she stammered. "You didn't even ask." Reed looked at her, his eyes soft but serious. You're not a machine. Tali, he said. You're not a weapon. Not a thing to be reset. You deserve to be free fully, completely. And forever, she stared at him, breathing hard, unsure if she should cry or hit him. But instead, she whispered, You don't understand what you just did. He smiled gently. No, but I know I'd do it again. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Tali leaned closer, her forehead gently touching his shoulder. Her body trembled not from pain but from something deeper, something unfamiliar. Safety. Reed said nothing. Just wrapped a blanket around her, and they sat beside the fire. Outside, the wind howled like the ghosts of her past, but inside, the warmth held steady. Later that night, while Reed slept on the floor nearby, Tali lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the pain in her back was fading, but something else lingered, his words, his touch. The way he looked at her like she was more than just scars and memories. She whispered into the dark, You're not like them. Then she closed her eyes and finally slept without fear, without the blade under her pillow for the first time. The nightmares didn't come, and in their place, a vision of a life she'd never dared to imagine. Asterisk snow was falling outside, quiet and slow. Tali stood by the window, wrapped in a blanket, watching the forest disappear under white. She looked peaceful, but Red knew better. He could see the tightness in her jaw, the way her fingers dug into the cloth. Something was coming. She could feel it, and then 3 loud knocks, heavy and cold like the weather. Reed looked at the door, blaster in hand, but this time it wasn't Mercs. It was worse. 2 officers in polished armor stood tall, with a government seal glowing on their chest plates. Behind them, a sleek hovercraft hummed low. Ready to take someone away, we come with lawful authority, one said, voice robotic. Reed didn't invite them in, they pushed through anyway. Tali stayed behind the wall, hidden, but listening, her heart beating like thunder. We know you sheltered a Class 7 biological asset. The officer continued, female hybrid engineered, escaped from military control, Red raised. An eyebrow. She's not an asset. She's government property, the officer snapped. Return her, and this matter ends here. Reed stared at them, calm but burning inside. And if I don't? He asked. Then we remove her with force, the second officer said. And charge you with harboring state equipment behind the wall? Talia's knees nearly gave out. Her body shook not with fear of death but fear of losing herself. Again, not after everything, not after she'd started to feel human. Reed crossed his arms. Give me a minute, he said, walking toward the hallway. The officers didn't follow too confident, too sure of the law. Tali met him in the hallway. Eyes wide, voice shaking. They'll take me back, she whispered. I know what they'll do. I won't let them, Reed said. You can't fight the government, she hissed. Not and survive. He cupped her face gently. Then we don't fight. We vanish. In the next 10 minutes, Reed packed a bag rations, data chips, a stolen ID scrambler, and an old transport key. Tali grabbed her coat, her knife, and the last photo Red had of his sister. You're bringing that? She asked. She taught me how to run, he smiled, and how to protect the ones who can't. They opened the back hatch quietly. The officer spotted the movement and gave chase. Stop, one shouted, but Reed threw a flash pellet behind them. White light exploded, blinding sensors and eyes. They ran into the woods, feet crunching snow. Breath like smoke in the cold. A blast zipped past Reed's shoulder. Searing the edge of his jacket, Tali grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the hidden cave. He had shown it to her once, long ago, a place for emergencies. He'd said back then, not knowing it would become a lifeline. Inside the cave, it was dark and narrow, but safe. Tali collapsed against the wall, panting. Red sat beside her, wincing from the near-miss burn. I'm sorry, she whispered. I never meant to pull you into this. You didn't, he said. I walked in the day I carried you out of that square. She reached for his hand in the darkness, her fingers trembling. You still have a choice, she said. Leave. Me and you can be free, he looked at her. Eyes burning with something stronger than anger. I already made my choice, he said, and I choose you. Talia's breath caught. No one had ever said those words to her, not without command. Not without ownership, But this wasn't control. This wasn't a deal. This was something else. Something real. They stayed in the cave until morning, the officers long gone. The next day, Reed activated the stolen ID scrambler and changed their biosignature. They couldn't go back, not to the town, not to the house, but it didn't matter. Tali was. Smiling now, even if just a little, even if just for a second. As they walked into the snow-covered valley below, Tali stopped and looked up at him. "You're not afraid of losing everything?" she asked. He shook his head. "Not when what I found is more important. What did you find?" He paused, brushing a bit of frost from her cheek. "You," he said softly, "and I'm never giving you up." She leaned forward, rested. Her forehead against his chest, the snow fell around them, but neither of them felt cold. For the first time, they weren't running from something. They were running toward something together. The hall was full of whispers, alien faces, human faces, diplomats, refugees. Reporters, everyone had come to witness the impossible. At the center, under a glowing light, stood Taliesin, no longer in chains, no longer in rags. Her posture was tall, proud, her scars uncovered and glowing like war medals. Beside her stood Reed Carter in his old jacket, patched and dusty, but clean-eyed and calm. They stood before a council made of 12 worlds, the same government that once labeled her biological property. Tali held a data crystal in her hand. Inside it, video proof of illegal enhancements. Auctions and the chain trade markets leaked by Red, protected by rebels, now broadcast across 100 systems. "You understand what this means?" said the head of the council, his voice shaking. Tali nodded slowly. "I do, then speak," he said, "for the galaxy is listening." She stepped forward, her voice steady and clear. "I was created to be a weapon," she said. "Engineered, sold, renamed again and again. I was called Unit 12, then slave, then asset, then nothing at all. But a human mechanic gave me something no one else ever did." The room leaned in closer. The camera zoomed. "He gave me my name," she continued. "He gave me a choice, and never once asked for anything back. And today I use that choice." She turned toward Red, her eyes soft, her voice trembling now. "You were given me in chains, Reed Carter," she said, "but I give you my hand by choice." Gasps filled the chamber, and the council leaned back in disbelief. "This is not a protest," she said. "It is a vow." She dropped the data crystal to the floor, shattering it like a final lock broken. Reed stepped forward, took her hand in his. "No chains," he said gently. "Only love." A single tear rolled down her cheek. For the first time, she whispered, "I am not afraid." They embraced in front of the council, in front of the cameras, in front of every eye that once looked away, and this time no one turned away. Applause rose slowly, then stronger, then louder. Not everyone understood what they saw, but they felt it. Hope. Weeks later, in a green valley on a quiet moon, Reed and Tali built a home. Not a fortress, not a cage, just a place with flowers outside and windows wide open. There was no door lock, no weapons at the walls. Only a bell by the garden and 2 chairs on the porch one morning as the sun rose orange over the hills. Tali sat outside, brushing her hair in the wind. Reed walked up behind her, a mug in his hand. "You keep staring at the sky," he said with a smile. She looked up, eyes soft. "I used to wonder what freedom looked like," she replied. "Now I see it every morning." Reed sat beside her, their hands finding each other without trying. They didn't speak for a while, because they didn't need to. The world didn't feel heavy anymore. The past still existed, but it no longer defined them. Later that night, Tali placed a seed in the ground near their porch. "A flower from my home planet," she said softly. "It only blooms when it feels safe." Reed knelt beside her, covering the soil gently. Then, "It'll bloom fast," he said. "This place is safe now." She smiled. The kind of smile that only comes from surviving the worst and choosing to live anyway. And as the stars lit the sky above, she whispered, "Thank you for not seeing me as a thing." Reed looked at her with love that burned brighter than any. "Star, you were never a thing, Tali," he said. "You were always someone nigh, just reminded you." That night, in the quiet home they built together, they stood before the fire once more. No collars, no blades, no guards, no chains, only each other. Dolly wrapped her arms around the man who gave her back her life. She whispered something. Only he could hear. I was made for war, but I chose you instead. And for the first time, the galaxy saw something stronger than weapons, stronger than laws. It saw a love that began with freedom and ended in vows.